We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph from Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 43a. And the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing a situation where a woman is killed by an animal. So then you have a kofar payment, and the Gemara said that according to Rabbi Akiva, that kofar payment is considered to be ro'oi, not muchzak, meaning it's considered to be something that is set to come to the woman after her death, not something she's already in possession of. And so therefore, the husband does not inherit the kofar payment, and instead the kofar payment is going to go to the heirs of the wife. In contrast, when it comes to nezek, let's say there was damage that was done that the woman is supposed to collect, and then she dies. So in that situation, that payment is actually going to go to her husband. And the Gemara said, is that really the case? But we have a brisa that seems to say the opposite, because the brisa says, if you have a situation of men that are fighting and they end up injuring a woman, and they end up causing her to miscarry, so it says that when it comes to the value of the fetus, so that goes to the husband and his heirs. However, when it comes to the nezek and the tsar, the damages and the pain, so that goes to her, or it goes to her heirs. So you see already, not like what we're saying with Rabbi Akiva, you see that the nezek goes to her yarshim, it does not go to the husband. And the brisa here continues, let's say you have a situation where the woman was a shifcha who was freed, and she marries an eved who was freed. The point over here is that they have no people to inherit them. O giores, or let's say a similar situation, she's a giores again, there are no people to inherit, so then zacha, so then the person who caused the injury is actually going to be able to keep it, he won't have to pay anything. And Rashi explains, Ogiores Mu'uberes Miger. The case over here is she's a convert, and she became pregnant from another convert. Umeisu Shneim, and they both died. So Potter Menakol. So the person who caused the damage is not going to have to pay anything. Shu Kodem Hoel Ve'ein Lo Yarshim, because he's the first one to have the money, and there's no people to inherit. There's no heirs. Kol HaKodem B'Shallah Zach. Anyone who gets to the objects first, so that person is going to become the owner. In this case, this person does not have to pay anything. V'Zesh Yesh No Biyado Kodem L'Chol. This person who caused the damage, he has all the money in his possession, so he's first kodem l'chol adam, he's before everybody. Aval Yisraelis mu'beres mi Yisrael, but let's say we're talking about a Jewish woman and she's pregnant from a Jewish man. Afilo ein lahem banim, even if they have no children, yesh lo yarshin liyarish chelka, there still is someone who's going to be considered to be an heir that will be able to take her portion. V'yesh lo yarshin liyarish chelka, and he's also going to have heirs, and they'll be able to take his portion. Now Rashi points out, in the case of the shifcha who was freed, we're talking specifically where she was freed before she was actually injured. But let's say the situation is that she was a shifcha when she was injured by the person, so then chaye bakol, so then the person's going to have to pay everything. Afilu b'dmei v'ladas, he'll even have to pay for the fetus. V'yitein ladonel, and then he'll have to give that to her master. The dmei v'aldas shifcha einam ela l'baylam shalah, because the value of the fetus of the shifcha always goes to her owner. Kedamrinan l'kaman, like we say later on, b'shor shenogach etzapora, we say this later on in parak shor shenogach etzapora, di'amar lechamarta mabarta azkas minai, because the person can say, essentially, I had a pregnant animal, and that's what you damaged from me, and therefore the master is able to collect payment. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba says, the way to understand this brisa, that it's not a contradiction to what Rabbi Akiva said. Again, this brisa seemed to say that the nezek payments go to her heirs and not to the husband. The answer is this brisa is begrusha. It's talking about a woman who is a divorcee. That's why the husband does not get those payments. V'chein Amar Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman also says begrusha. In this brisa, we're talking about a woman who is a divorcee. And Rashi explains, begrusha askinan, we're talking about a situation where she was divorced. Umishum hachi nosen liyarsha. That's why the payment for damages, it goes to her heirs. Shegirsha achar hachavola. Now the case over here is that he divorced her after the injury. Obviously, if the divorce was before the injury, then it's obvious that she's going to collect. The situation over here is that she was injured when she was married. Then he divorced her after the injury. Since he divorced her after the injury, so he no longer collects. Instead, it goes to her heirs. Again, that's the answer of Rabba and Rav Nachman. But the Gemara says, Amri, they said to this answer that if that's the case, if she's divorced, so grusha nami tiflug bidmei valdas. So in the case of a grusha, she should not only get the damages, she should be able to get the value of the fetus as well. But the brisa said that goes to the husband and to his heirs. So it doesn't make sense to say we're talking about a grusha, because why isn't she getting the dmei valdas? And the Gemara says to that, Amar of Papa says, HaTorah zochsa dmei valdas lebal. The situation when it comes to the value of the fetus, the Torah said that the husband is the one that gets that, and he doesn't need to be married. Afilu ba'aleh b'znus. Even if the pregnancy came as a result of znus, it didn't come as a result of a traditional marriage. still the pasuk says that the husband gets that payment. My time, and what's the reason? Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says kasher yoshis olav bal hoisha. It talks about the fact that the husband of the woman, the husband of the wife, he's the one that exacts this payment, and therefore he receives this payment. Rashi says bal hoisha aboel hikbid. When we say bal hoisha, it doesn't necessarily mean the husband. It means the boel. It means the one who caused her to become pregnant. But the Gemara continues, V'nukma l'rabba, but why don't we give a different answer to this question? V'nukma l'rabba kagon shegavu mos. We should say, according to Rabba, again, Rabba and Rav Nachman were the ones that interpreted this brisa that it's talking about a woman who is divorced. So we're going to say Rabba and Rav Nachman each have a different answer they can give. Rabba can say the answer is, the situation here is where they collected money. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Kagon shegavu mos, they collected money. Well, Rav Nachman, kagon shegavu karka. And according to Rav Nachman, we can say the brisa is talking about where they collected land. And the Gemara continues and elaborates, the Amar Rabba, because Rabba said, Gavu Karka Yeshlo, that if they collect land, so then he's able to receive it. This is talking about a Bechor. Again, we'll see Rashi in a moment, but Gavu Mos Einlo. But the Bechor does not get the double portion if they collect money. So again, Rabba should say we're talking about Gavu Mos, and just like the Bechor does not get the double portion, so too in this brisa, since we're talking about a situation where money was collected, the husband is not going to be able to get that money. For Rav Nachman, Amar Gavu Mos Yeshlo, Rav Nachman says the opposite by Bechor. He says if they collect money, so then the Bechor does get the double portion, but Gavu Karka Einlo, but if they collect land, so then the Bechor does not get the double portion. And again, say that over here we're talking about where they collected land in terms of the payment, and that's why the husband is not going to be able to get that payment for the damages, because it's going to be considered, as we'll see, it's going to be considered like Roy and not like Muchsuk. And the Gemara says to that, the reason why Rabban and Rav Nachman don't give that answer is, Amri, they answer as follows, Hani Mili Livnei Ma'arova that whole machlokas Rabban and Rav Nachman was according to those of the West, according to the Rabbanan's opinion. But over here we're not following the Rabbanan, here we're following Rebbe, and that's why they couldn't give that answer. This brisa follows Rebbe and has nothing to do with the machlokas Rabban and Rav Nachman. Again, we will take a look at Rashi. And Rashi explains, V'nukma l'Rabba, why don't we say according to Rabba, meaning Loma l'hu l'Rabba l'Rav Nachman, l'ukma begrusha. Why do Rabba and Rav Nachman have to say that the brisa which says that the payment for damages goes to her heirs and does not go to the husband, why do they have to say that the reason for that is that she's a grusha, that she's a divorcee? L'ukma marke de islay or marke de islay. Why doesn't each one just say what they say in a different context in Babba Basra, b'yesh nochlin, in Parak yesh nochlin? Nukma l'Rabba, kagon shegavu bezdin mos min hamazik, l'shalem nezik v'tzar. The case could be as follows. According to Rabba, when Bezdin collected the money for the damage that was done to this woman, for the nezik and the tsar, they collected money. Now, even though the obligation was while she was alive, she was already entitled to this money. Lo adif mi milva b'shtar. That's not any better than a loan with a shtar. As we're going to see, the machlokas here between Rabba and Rav Nachman, that whole discussion is talking about a collection of a loan, and that would be the same thing as when Bezdin collects the damages. Diyama Rabba gavu, because Rabba said that let's say they collect, meaning Yorshin Karka b'milva shehilva aviyim. Let's say you have a situation where their father, the one who died, so he lent money, and now they want to collect that loan from the person that owes the money. They are now taking over. They're like the creditors. The Yorshim are collecting this loan. So Rabbah says that if they collect land for this loan, so the question is that considered to be roy or is it considered to be muchsuk? Is it something that they were always in possession of, that the father was always in possession of when he was alive, or this is something that was supposed to come to the father, it's roy, and then the Bechor doesn't get the double portion? So Rabbah said it depends. If they collect land, that's considered like muchsuk. Then yeshlo the Bechor pishnayim. Then the Bechor actually does get double portion of the land. The havalei kamuchsuk, it's considered like muchsuk. The high karka ishtabed le'le'avun, because the land, he had a lien. The father had a lien on that property. But gavu mo saying lo. But if they collect money, that's considered like roy and not like muchsuk according to Rabbah, and therefore they don't collect. Therefore, rather the Bechor does not get pishnayim. He doesn't get the double portion. The lav hanimos hiniach avian. It's not the exact same money that the father lent out. This is different money. It's different cash. But have a roy, that's considered to be like roy. In other words, the point is, according to Rabbah, when you collect land for the loan, that's considered like muchsuk. When you collect money for the loan, that's considered like roy. And the idea is, let's apply the same thing over here. Here, where there's a collection for the damages that happened to her while she was alive, the question is, do her heirs, do they get those payments, or or does it go to the husband? The husband is only going to get it if it's considered to be muhsak. And so Rabba will say if it's land, the husband would be entitled. But the Brisa is talking about money, that's why the husband is not entitled. And Rashi continues that Rav Nachman says the exact opposite. Rav Nachman Amar, and Rav Nachman says, Gavu Mos Yeshla. On the contrary, if they collect for the loan, they collect money, so then the Bechor is going to get the double portion. The Chemuchzik Dami, that's considered like Muchzik. Why? Sharei Mos Hilva Aviyim Mos Nalu. Because the father lent money, now they're getting back money, so it's essentially like the exact same item coming back. That's considered like Muchzik according to Rav Nachman. Gavu Karka Ein Lo, however, if they collect the land for the loan, so then already the Bechor does not get the double portion. To Karka Lo Hiniach Avihem. The land is not what the father left over. On the contrary, the father lent out money, and now he's collecting land. That's considered like Roy, according to Rav Nachman. V'hachanami, and so the same thing over here. Look, Rav Nachman could go shagavu karka to have a Roy. Let's simply say that here we're talking about a situation where the karka was what was collected, which is considered a Roy, and therefore the husband is not going to get it. It's going to go to her heirs. And the Gemara ended up answering that whole machlokus between Rabba and Rav Nachman was according to the Rabbanon and not according to Rebbe. Amri, so they answer, Hani mili de eflog Rabba v'Rav Nachman b'yesh nochlin. That whole machlokus Rabba and Rav Nachman in Perek yesh nochlin Babba Basra, aliba de b'nei ma'arava, that's according to those of the West, de shalchu b'chor notel pishnayim b'milva v'lo b'ribis, because they sent a message that a b'chor does get a double portion in a loan, meaning he does get it, but he doesn't get it if any interest that comes from the loan. And so we ended up answering that we're following the Rabbanan who argue on Rebbe. And the Rabbanan happen to hold that a Bechor does not get a double portion in any kind of improvement that happens to property. Let's say it's trees and then they produce fruits. If that happens after the death of their father, so the Rabbanan hold that the Bechor does not get Pishnayim in that. And that's why over here also, when it comes to the loan, so the Bechor can get Pishnayim in the loan, he's able to get the double portion of the loan itself, but not the Ribis. That's similar to Shevach. In any case, that is what the Rabbanan say. The Rebbe now, whereas Rebbe holds, Afilu B'ribis Nami Shakel Pishnayim. Rebbe goes even further, and he says that the Bechor is allowed to get a double portion even when it comes to the interest. The Shivcha D'Memelahu, that's considered Shevach, that comes automatically. So in other words, within that machlokas between Rebbe and the Rabbanan, where we're saying that according to the Rabbanan, he only gets Pishnayim, let's say, in the principal, in the original loan, but not the Ribis, because there is no Pishnayim for the Bechor in any improvements that happen after the death of the father. So within the sheet of the Rabbanan, there's a machlokas Rabba and Rav Nachman. Upershua Rabba v'Rav Nachman lahad v'nei ma'arava. So Rabba and Rav Nachman, they explain what those in the West said. The Amri l'Rabbanan b'chor notel pishnayim b'milva. Because again, they say according to the Rabbanan that the Bechor does at least get the double portion of a loan. Mar begavu mos, so mar begavu karka. So one says we're talking about specifically where they collect money, and the other one says we're talking about karka. That was the machlokas Rabba and Rav Nachman. And Rashi continues, V'chi amri hachen, why do they say over here, why do Rab and Rav Nachman answer begrusha, that we're talking specifically about a woman who's divorced, and that's why she gets, and her heirs get the nezek payment? V'lo mukminan labahachi, why don't we say that the reason why she gets it again is because it's considered to be roy and not muchzak? The reason is simple, because we're following over here Rebbe, because this Bryce is following Rebbe. Rebbe goes even further and says that the firstborn, the Bechor, is able to get the double portion even when it comes to the improvements. The Kol Shekain V'Milvan, certainly when it comes to the loan, he can always get the double portion. The Chaman de Gavya Dami, because according to Rebbe, unlike the Rabbanan, we always consider a loan to be considered something that's already been collected. That's considered muchzak. Loshna Gavu Karka, Veloshna Gavu Mos, doesn't matter if they're collecting land, it doesn't matter if they're collecting money, meaning according to Rebbe, the Rebbe holds that it's always considered muchzak, and you see that from the fact that it even applies to the interest, it even applies to the shevach. And therefore, since the Bryce is following Rebbe, you cannot answer that depending on what exactly is collected, land or money, maybe it's considered roy. That's not true. That's only true within the Rabbanan, who say that when it comes to the shevach, when it comes to the ribis, that does not go as a double portion to the firstborn. But here again, we're talking according to Rebbe, and we'll say for sure it's considered to be muchzak. There's no question, and therefore the husband really technically should get these payments for the nezek. Hilkach hilav the girsha. Therefore, if not for the fact that she was a divorcee, the only way we can explain this brisa why the husband is not getting it is because she was divorced. If not for the fact that she was divorced, shakil de baal kebechor, then the husband would get it because he's just like a bechor. Umiu bekofer. Now, nevertheless, returning to the situation of kofer, we say that kofer is different. That is considered to be a payment that is roy. Afilu Rebbe moda. Even Rebbe agrees when it comes to kofer, meaning even Rebbe who says in general that when it comes to these collections, collections of loans and things like that they're considered always to be like muchzuk, but when it comes to kofer, Rebbe admits the roihu, that is considered to be like roy. That's not considered to be something which she is already in possession of. The hoel ve'ein bo shum chiyuv mechaim, because when it comes to kofer, there's no obligation to pay kofer whatsoever while she was alive. It's not like nezek where the obligation sets in while she's alive. This is an obligation that sets in only after the woman was killed. So therefore, lo have keshivcha d'memela. Therefore, it's not considered like an automatic kind of improvement that accrues on its own, and therefore even Rebbe would agree that the kofer payment is considered to be like roy, and that would always go to her and to her heirs. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Reish Lakish says, Shur shehemis es ha'eved shelo bekavona. If an ox kills an eved, if an ox kills a slave without intention, pater mishloshim shkalim. In that case, the owner is going to be pater from paying the 30 shekel fine. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, kesef shloshim shkalim yitein la'adonav. It says that you pay the 30 shekel to the master. V'hashor yisakel, and it says that the ox is stoned. And we darshan as follows: Kol zman shashor beskila habaylim mishalmin shloshim shkalim. As long as you're going to stone the ox, so then the owners have to pay the 30 shkalim. But ein hashor beskila. But if the ox is not stoned, like in this case where there was no intention, so there is no skila, ein habaylim mishalmin shloshim shkalim. So the owners don't pay the 30 shkalim in that case. And the Gemara continues along the same lines. Rabba says, Shor shehemis ben chorin, if you have an ox that kills a free person, meaning not an eved, shalo b'kavan, again without intention, pater mi kofer. So it's going to be that the owner of the ox is going to be pater from kofer. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Ashor yisakil v'gam ba'ol of yumas. It says again, the ox is stoned and the owner dies, which again means kofer, and kofer yushas olav. The pasuk goes on to say that the owner pays kofer, and we understand that to mean kol zman shashor b'skila ba'ila mishalman kofer. As long as the ox is stoned, then the owners pay kofer. Ein hashor b'skila, but if the ox is not stoned, ein ba'ila mishalman kofer, then the owners do not pay kofer. And Rashi points out, Ein hashor b'skila, ein habayla mishalman kofer. Again, according to Rabba, if the shore is not stoned, so then the owners do not pay kofer. Rabbi Lazar damer le'el. Now, Rabbi Lazar said earlier, Ein dini ela b'miskavin laharag v'chulu. He was talking specifically about a case where the animal did not have kavana, and he was talking about a tam, saying that a tam doesn't pay kofer, implying that a muah does. So therefore, Rashi says, Polagoleh. It's clear that Rabbi Lazar argues with Rabba to me the itzrich krola miftere betam, because from the fact that the pasuk is saying that a tam is pater shelo bekavana when the tam does it without intention, mechlal de muad shelo bekavana, that implies that a muad that does it without intention is pater mimisa, is in fact pater from death, is not going to get stoned. However, v'chai bekofer, however, there is a chiyuv to pay kofer, and Rabba disagrees. Rabba across samich. Now Rabba is relying on the pasuk as we just said in the Gemara. Umukuminan lemasisin delakaman kavasi. We're going to say the Mishnah later on is like Rabba. The hayde katani masisin pater mikofer umiskila kamar. That when the Mishnah says pater, it's talking not only from kofer, but not only from skila rather, but from kofer as well. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Abaye. Abaye asks a question from the following Mishnah. Hey, Miss Shorias Ploni O Shoro Shal Ploni. Let's say the owner admitted, he said, my ox killed so-and-so, or killed the ox of so-and-so. Hareza Mishalim Al Piatzma. So he's going to pay through his admission. And the Gemara says, my lav, is it not kofer? Aren't we talking about kofer over here? And the problem is, if we're talking about kofer, this would be a case where the ox is not stoned, because we say that the ox is not stoned if there's an admission by the owner, and yet you see you are paying kofer even though the ox is not stoned. And the Gemara says, lo no damim, we're actually pater from kofer in this case, but you have to pay money, meaning to say there is damages over here in the case where the ox killed a certain person, and therefore you have to pay for the damages. The Gemara says, but damim, but if we're talking here about money, meaning regular damages, so let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Hey, Miss Shorias Avdo Shal Ploni. Let's say the person admits and says, my ox killed the eved of so-and-so. Eino Mishalim Al Piatzma. It says over there, he doesn't pay by his admission. And so the Gemara says, V'i damim. Now, if we're not talking about the fine, the knas that you pay, the shloshim shkolim, but we're talking about damim, we're talking about the damages that are paid, amailo, so why not pay? If you're talking about damim in this Mishnah, you should have to pay for any damages that were caused when your shore kills the eved of so-and-so. And so the Gemara says, Amar Le, he said back to him, Yachilna l'shanu yelach, I could answer you and say as follows, Reisha damim v'seifa knas, that the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about damim, it's talking about money that you're paying for damages, and the end of the Mishnah, by the case of the eved, is talking about the fine, the shloshim shkolim, that apply to an eved, maybe the Reish and seifa. are not talking about the same thing. But nevertheless, Rabba says, I don't want to give a dochik answer, a forced answer. Rather, idi v'idi damim. Rather, both parts of the Mishnah are talking about damim. They're talking about the money for damages. And Rashi explains, this Mishnah is talking about a case of a muad. Katani mihas hemis shorias ploni mishalim al piatzma. What does it say? If the owner admits, and then you do pay. My lav kofer, isn't that talking about kofer? V'yafagav dein hashor beskila, even though you're not going to stone the shore. Sharei hod, because he admitted. V'yamru kamisas bailam kach misas hashor, and we say that the killing of the shore follows the same halachas as the killing of the person in a situation where a person has to be killed. V'yadam bahudaso eino nereg. We know that a person is never killed by admission, and then therefore the shore is not going to be killed by admission. And Rashi continues, the Gemara said, no, we're not talking about kofer in this Mishnah, rather damim, we're talking about money, meaning money for damages. That's what we mean to say when the person admits that his shore killed a certain person, he has to pay the money for damages. Hadikatani mishalim, again, when it says in the Mishnah that he has to pay, lav b'toras kofer, we're not talking about kofer over here. Dini boy kapar, we're not saying that the person needs atonement. Kofer is considered like an atonement. Da'afilu lo mishalim nami, meaning even if the person, let's say, wouldn't pay, you still need a kapar if you're saying there's a chi of kofer. Kagoni lesle nichse, for example, let's say a person has no property, but no la bichlal lo neshu. He's not under that punishment of kofer. He's not under that punishment that requires kapara. De'ain kofer below skila the shore, because again, it is true that there's no kofer if there's no skila of the shore, if there's no stoning of the axe. Aval hecha de isle nichse. Nevertheless, if the person does have property, al karcha mashalim damim, even if there's no kofer, he still has to pay money for damages. The lo gara misa minizaken, because killing someone is not less than causing damage to someone. The ilu azke, for example, if the person would have damaged, let's say the shore would have damaged the person, avagav de'eno beskila, even though there's no skila, boy l'shlume le'pchas damav, you certainly need to pay whatever value the person lost. Hachanami meshalim damav liyarshav. So to over here, he's certainly going to need to pay the money to the yarshim. Again, the person has been killed, so you're obviously not going to pay the person, but you're going to pay for the damages, and that's what it means. And the Gemara then continued, Eino meshalim al piatzmo. Again, it said that if this happened with an Evid, he would not pay by admission. The shloshim shel Evid kanasin, because the 30 shkolim you pay by an Evid is considered to be a fine. And so the Gemara said, V'i damim. Now, if the Mishnah is not talking about fines, but just talking about the regular payment for damages, kolomar, meaning to say, V'sal kadaitach yesh toras nizakin, if you're talking over here about a law of nizakin, lahecha dekatle, in a situation where he's killed, because that's what we're arguing over here, that even in a situation where the person is killed, there is a din of regular nezek. V'al karchach ki hechi ben chorin b'makom shein kofer meshalim damav. If a free person would be killed, and we're saying that if there is no kofer, you have to pay damages, that's what we're suggesting. So Evan Nami b'makom shein kanas meshalim damav, the same should be true by an Evid. If there's no fine, there should be damages. Ve'amaika tani de law, and why does it say over here that there is no payment? And then Rabba said, Shinuya dechika betray time. I don't want to say a forced answer, where we're saying that the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about a payment of damim, and the end of the Mishnah is talking about kanas, and so therefore he said that really they're both talking about damim, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis.